Hello to my air signs, Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini. Welcome to the Gemini new moon. You'll find the timestamps for your rising sign listed below. Hello Libra rising, welcome to your horoscope for the new moon in Gemini, happening on the 18th of June at 2:39 p.m. if you're in the southern hemisphere with me. So if you're in the northern, it's the night before on the 17th. This one is, I'm wearing a blanket for a reason, because this is a cozy one. This is sort of a new moon that it might be good not to kind of be overstimulated at this one. Although in your chart, Libra rising, it's pointing to a pretty active, pretty exciting house. However, there is two arguments going on at this time, and they're happening between the signs Gemini and Pisces. So that's your cardinal energy, that's mutable energy, which is the signs that give way to the weather of the next season. In the southern hemisphere, we're giving way to, or we're receiving winter. And so this sort of feeling of being like a bit coddled and quiet and sleepy and relaxed is taking precedence. Gemini rules your 9th house, Libra. So this is where we expand our mind, where we learn about philosophy, astrology, spirituality in a sort of more like academic way. We kind of take like formalized sort of lessons and guidance. We sort of find teachers in the 9th, and also we travel too. So this is why I was sort of saying that it's kind of like, as much as it sort of feels like a bit of a sleepy time at this one, the house that this new moon, the option to manifest or ask for or cast a spell or whatever language that you like to use or whatever you like to do at a new moon as well. But there's an emphasis on your 9th house, which is all of those things that feel quite, large and expansive and exciting. The reason that there's pressure is because there's square, so 90 degrees apart, pressure, an argument between this new moon and Neptune in Pisces. So Neptune's been in Pisces for a long time. It's been there since the first pass was in 2011, and they were in Pisces full-time from 2012. And so with the outer planets, there's not sort of always going to be a direct influence or a direct sort of feeling from those planets, but in aspect, there's points to make note of. So at this new moon, there really is, because it's a degree apart, the sun and the moon are moving towards an exact square with Neptune. So Neptune brings dreams and fantasy, and in its shadow, or in its sort of difficult side of life, it can delude us too. It can have us sort of getting too lost in the ether or in the planes of existence that alter our sense of reality. And this is really hard for you, Libra, because Pisces does rule your 6th house, which is all about kind of harsh reality. It's about repetition. It's about chores, what you do in a day, how you go about a day, and what's required and expected of you. So if we think about the sort of square, first of all, between those two energies, and then there's also another one in the same signs. Neptune, if it's going to bring with it this sort of sense of delusion, if it's trying to fight for some kind of precedence, it can kind of have us off with the fairies so much that, we don't really kind of recognize what's going on in the here and now, or we try and kind of stick our head in the sand and kind of avoid what's going on in the here and now. There's a lot of perhaps potential for spiritual bypassing, if you've heard that term before. That can happen with Neptune, because Neptune's sort of like a shaman, very kind of, seductive and, it's got all the answers, but the answers are in you too, kid. I love Neptune, but I'm a Pisces rising, so I kind of have this, I'm a bit enamored with shiny things. Libra, if it's going to be, it's been in your sixth house for, as I said, over a decade now. So there could have been something in the harsh reality of your day-to-day that's been sort of building momentum in terms of taking or thinking about life from a different perspective. If you wanted to manifest with this new moon in Gemini in your ninth house, in your house of learning and academia and travel and mind expansion, you can see how it's sort of like, I'm going to speak about Saturn and Mercury too, because I almost don't want to cut you off at the quick as well. Like whatever you're kind of working towards or moving towards, Libra, like I want to encourage that. If spirituality and spiritual lessons kind of chill you out and give you hope and give you something to sort of have, a bit of faith that doesn't have anything to do with a guru or kind of, someone in power at the very top. If it's about self-empowerment, then that's really awesome. And I would really encourage you to learn about that as much as you can. It does kind of feel like there's, just be mindful of that, that act of spiritual bypassing. Keep on saying that, but I think that it is Saturn's influence in Pisces too. So let's talk about that. Saturn is the planet that brings with it harsh lessons. It's the ringed planet that for the longest time the ancients thought was the outer limits of the galaxy, because they could see it with their naked eye. That was the furthest afield that they could see was Saturn, far, far away. And so that's a boundary, and that's sort of, that's where that feeling of kind of like harsh lessons and like restriction comes from. Saturn's been in Pisces for a couple of months now, for most of this year, I think. I have to remember when they've moved in first up. At 7 degrees of Pisces, they've just come out of an exact square with Mercury in Gemini. So I want to sort of pare that back and make it less confusing. Mercury is the planet that guides Gemini. So Mercury is like the Eureka planet, the sort of planet that helps us go, oh, that's what I want to do, or that's excellent. That's a clear message that I can understand and I'm going to move forward. If we're going to harness Gemini energy, we're going to talk about it too. We're going to have conversations. So this is all happening in your ninth house. This is lessons about spirituality and philosophy. This is, journeying, seeking out, moving around to go and engage in those lessons too. Maybe there's like a retreat or something that you've had your eye on that you were thinking about going towards. And I suppose this square with Saturn and Neptune in your sixth is kind of like, yes, that's all brilliant, but like this is also the reality that we're living through. I don't wish for this to be mean-spirited, Libra, but it kind of feels like the message is kind of like there's constructive work for us to do at this time, and no amount of spiritual retreats or love and lighting, positive thinking, that's all helpful and that's all beautiful stuff that can regulate a nervous system too. It can help us with our anxiety. But if it's this continual journey of like seeking out time and time again, the reason I'm saying that too is because I do have a bit of a sort of sensitive trigger. Like I'll get out of there if the going gets tough. I've been trained to run, from when I was very young, always running, always kind of sensing danger and then getting out of there. And so that's kind of also related to that head in the sand feeling too, isn't it? It's sort of like, la, it's not happening. Like, I guess maybe that's the conversation to have at this new moon. And now I don't mean to say, you've got to get back to reality, although Saturn might be saying that. Saturn in your sixth house might be really saying, come on, Libra, like, what are you doing? What are you, like, all of this Pisces energy is awesome. Love that sort of, you know, beautiful, psychedelic, trippy, psychic connectivity. But how, like, this is real. This is real life. This is what's happening right now. So the balance needs to be struck between, you know, delusion and between a harsh reality. We don't have to go so, you know, it doesn't have to be so polarized as to be either you're completely deluded or you're a complete pessimist. There can be a happy medium that's struck. You know that, Libra. That's your vibe. So maybe that's the message of this new moon in Gemini, is sort of like, I'm going to put all of my eggs in one basket. I'm going to, you know, follow this high priestess of whatever chapel, sacred order. Sorry to be facetious. I think it's, I've had a check of, yeah, okay, here we go. There's a lot of reports about the Hillsong Church right now. Now, I don't know if I can say their name or not, or if I don't know what the rules are. I'm not going to. Faith can be shattered if abused. You can really believe in something with all of your heart, and it can give you such peace of mind. And or you can even have respect for those around you that do. That's my experience, I guess, when I was younger. It's this feeling of, well, it's not really for me, but I tell you what, it's really helping these folks, so I'm going to be respectful. I respect faith. That's what I do now. I respect everybody's faith now. I think that every religion is valid as long as there is a sense of autonomy in that worship, in that devotion. If you feel that you are being lit up from within, and if you feel that it's giving you love and peace, you know, like when a nonna clutches her rosary, freaks out in grief, I believe that woman, and I want to sit down and have a glass of wine with her. I think that, yeah, God, it's opening up. There's things that I'm willing to say and I just can't say it. Isn't that funny, Libra? That's interesting for me because we're talking about your ninth house, which you could probably put a bit of organized religion in that definition too. Faith is really vulnerable. It's really gentle, and it's really so precious and can really help us out. But when it feels like it's been abused, or when it feels like it's been taken advantage of, it can be really invasive and really damaging and really hurtful, and also, like, clunk, bring us right back down to earth. And the colder, harsher aspects of reality can sort of feel like they've just grown in size. From this moment, I wish for you, Libra, to follow your intuition. And it seems like, you know, I sound like one of those gurus, you know, like, but it's really the truth. And the definition is really important for you to get your head around too. It's like, trust yourself, you know. Devotion to a spiritual practice is a tightrope. And we can sort of feel it as the generation that is experiencing the last hurrah of Pluto's destruction in Capricorn, which is hierarchy. All of the news reports that are coming out now about different organized, faith-based, yeah, I mean, organizations is probably the best word for it. They're not really churches, they're businesses. But this is all happening for some purpose at this time. It's so we can witness it hopefully we can make reparations for folks that have been really hurt and damaged by these corrupt systems. Hopefully we can clear enough space to still have access to faith and to a sense of spirituality. And hopefully that playing field is going to be much more even. And hopefully we're going to have a greater sense of connection to spirit without having to pay this or pay that or devote ourselves to this particular narrow scope. It's been really in my reality at the moment. I've been really witnessing and trying to not read a lot of news, but it's also a responsibility for us to keep a handle on the truth of the matter right now, because there is a lot of disinformation moving around about all sorts of different things, and there is a lot of polarization, and there is a lot of rising negative, hateful intentions. And so it's not really very responsible to stick one's head in the sand and not ingest the news. However, also, you can see how I'm ping-ponging. I'm sorry, Libra, I know that there's no answers in this one, but I think that this is just an example of the frenetic Gemini vibe right now. Nobody has all of the answers, including you. And no one's going to make you better by you devoting yourself solely to them and their teaching. We've got to use our privilege where we can get it, where we find it, Libra. That recoiling feeling from, potential kind of like someone taking advantage. I know it really well. And sometimes I have a difficult time with, kind of this stuff too, because I wish to be, what I wish for these things to be is a lovely 15 minutes to sit down and have a chat, chill out a bit, to take the pressure off. There's nothing that we really have to do with the astrology. If it gives us comfort to learn about it, if it gives us comfort to feel a bit less alone when things are so tense or so volatile, then that's great. Sort of went a bit off course there, didn't I, Libra? Yeah, in closing, nestle into this new moon. You don't have to do anything. And as you continue on your path to self-discovery and exploration and spiritual magic, keep the knowledge in your back pocket that you already know most of the answers to. The tarot teaches us anything in one sentence. It comes from the High Priestess, and she says, you already know. That's the reading. I might... If you're still here, throw me a little drama mask in the comments. The snakes really helped last time. Thank you. I know that there's sort of nothing really conclusive here, or there's no sort of direct, but who am I to yeah. Gemini's really about this and that too. Inconclusive, but talkative. If you'd like to throw some tip money in my tip jar, you can head to buymeacoffee.com/umaruby and do that. I can read your birth chart or your tarot at umaruby.com. And I'll be with you in 2 weeks back here on YouTube for the full moon in Capricorn. So, yeah, let's take the delusion, let's take the fantasy, the possibility of what might be to come, and let's do nothing at this one, Gemini, Libra. Let's do nothing. I'll see you later. Bye. Hello, Aquarius. Welcome to your horoscope for the new moon in Gemini happening on the 18th of June at 2:39 p.m. if you're in the southern hemisphere with me. Now, this one, I'm getting comfy for this one. I think that it might be a great evening or afternoon, as the case may be, to grab a blankie and to just sort of chill with it. Down here in the southern hemisphere, Gemini represents that changeover of seasons. We really, by the end of Gemini season, have sort of settled into this idea of the colder months of winter. And with winter can come a real want to hibernate. If depending on what your schedule is like, I found that I'm up very early when the sun rises, and then as the sun sets, I'm sort of winding it down. And the sun's setting down here at like 4:30, 5 o'clock, so it's sort of like winding down quite early. The seasons kind of help us regulate the body, regulate the rhythm of the physical body, and we can kind of, if we've got the privilege of doing so, take these months as a point of reflection rather than sort of overt activation, you know. There's two conversations happening at this new moon. The sun and the moon are at 26 degrees of Gemini, which is your fifth house, how you find voice to express yourself and to create and to make and to relay the experience of living from your vantage point alone. The fifth house is really great for inner child work too, for sort of like getting to the part of you that didn't have the experience of being told off for showing off, you know, before, if you can think back that far. But I've been spending a lot of time with kids and they're just so beautiful in their freedom of telling it from their perspective and really wanting to sort of investigate and engage and be with you. And they're incredibly self-serving, which I find just so adorable. I think it's really sweet that their mind, kind of in sort of like a Gemini way, is sort of really sort of absorbing a lot of information at all times. And they're sort of wanting to put out the next thought or see the next, create the next thing from what they're being guided into. Yeah, it's just beautiful. It's really nice. It does maybe kind of bring up a bit of a lamentation if you've had a difficult time in the fifth house. Perhaps there was times, I think for a lot of us there's a certain pinpoint or multiple pinpoints of time where you can recognize where you were told to zip it, or you were told to pipe down, stop showing off, to sit down, to keep quiet, keep small, don't tell anyone. All of that kind of stuff is really like, it can affect us even now, which I'm kind of, it's taken me years and years and years to look back that far, to look over my shoulder that far, So at 26 degrees of Gemini in your fifth house, your inner child zone, where you create, where you express yourself, where you tell people what you think. There's a square happening with Neptune in Pisces. So Neptune's been in Pisces for many years now. It's been about 12 so far. They'll leave finally in January of 2026, but there was a first pass in 2011, mid-year, and then they were in Pisces from 2012 until now, until the present moment. So they're at 27 degrees. So it's sort of, they're reaching that endpoint critical degree where the final lessons will be revealed to all of us. But if we think about Neptune, which is the planet of illusion, the planet of make-believe, the planet of magic, all of those lovely childlike things, you know. In Pisces, which is the sign of supreme empathy and connectivity and sort of communal care, the generation that we've kind of, if you, depends on how old you are, but like the last 11, 12 years or so, there's been another sort of resurgence of, folks wanting to connect with some sense of spirituality or magic or divination or all of that kind of stuff, all of the language of, sort of, the other dimensions and all of that. Those crazy concepts have all been kind of coming to the forefront and being shared around and being hopefully discussed in a way that's, inquisitive rather than domineering or kind of, anyway, I've gone off track. Excuse me, Aquarius. Pisces is your second house, so it's your assets, career, how you're going to turn a buck, how you accrue, how you take care of yourself. So what I see here is there's like a push and a pull between like an individual sense of self-expression and also how you're going to make some money. So the tarot cards that we have to work with at this one are the Ten of Swords, which is the final decan of Gemini. Remember, there's 3 decans in each sign. The Sun and the Moon sit at the Ten of Swords, which is a finite ending. A repetitious thought pattern is coming to a close and the sun is rising on that. So what this makes me feel is, I can really feel it quite strongly. The lack of access to a bit of self-love, the distrust or mistrust of your perspective being something worthwhile is what I feel maybe at this moon. This square with Neptune, remember Neptune brings the magic, brings the stardust, the majesty. Well, they're sitting, and they have been for ages now, at the Ten of Cups in the tarot, the final decan of Pisces. So this looks like a beautiful scene at the end of a movie, doesn't it? The rainbow and the cups and the happy family, happy ever after. Yeah, that's bullshit. It's a bullshit card. Love it. It can mean lots of lovely things depending on who you're reading for and how it comes out. But ultimately, when we think about it in relationship to the zodiac, or, this card and also Neptune's influence on us sometimes it's got a lot to answer for. We're sort of fed this version of reality that, one meets the other, one or two work very hard, accrue and buy and expand and give birth and pass on to the next generation. That fantasy, and it's really lovely to sort of think about when you're a kid too, back to that 5th house. You can sort of imagine, what will I be when I grow up? Who will I be with? How many children will I have? I mean, I used to think about those sorts of things, not too deeply, I'll be honest with you, but like that was what you're told when you're little, so you sort of take it and sort of run with it. Maybe even if you're not told by authority figures or caregivers, you just, by sheerly being a human person, the media that you take in, the fairy tales, the cartoons, everything is sort of centered around that idea of one meets the other and family is developed and property is maintained and passed on. So the reason I'm being maybe a bit hypercritical about this card, Aquarius, is because that square you might be feeling that at this new moon on the 18th of June, or it might be something that has been on your mind for a while too. This sort of feeling of not malcontent, but kind of like at a bit of a loss as to, and depending on how old you are as well, it might not be hitting you so sincerely. But I get the feeling that this configuration could be almost as if you're having to sort of set down some of your dreams as well. You know, if Neptune represents dreams and fantasy, that's lovely. The shadow side of Neptune is delusion. And so there might be a sort of critical voice in your ear saying, you're kidding yourself. Maybe you're kidding yourself because this is really unattainable for you. People like you don't have this. That could be a not nasty thing, that this Gemini energy is lingering in your ear, shouting at you. That's not the only sort of configuration that's causing a ruckus, Aquarius. The other thing is that Saturn is also in Pisces, and they're squaring, or just have come out of an exact square, with Mercury in Gemini. So if Mercury brings messages with it, if Mercury is our sort of beeline to the gods, the bridge where we get to listen, get the downloads, receive the info, and Saturn is the one with the rings that's sort of really about boundaries. I mean, you know Saturn really well. You've lived with Saturn in your first house for the last few years. This is the other side to that coin. So it's kind of what I'm kind of feeling at this moon, Aquarius, is that it's like, wouldn't it be great if this is how I lived? Wouldn't it be great if this is how I put my talents to use, and this is how I earned money, and this is how I developed, and this is how I met my one true love, and this is how I developed parental longings, and we had 2.5 kids and a dog and a cat and a picket fence, and then I would sit there and then I'd be happy because that's what I've been told is the ultimate happiness. I could be completely off track, Aquarius. If that's the fantasy, that's sort of, if Neptune, because it's been there for a long time now, it's been there for over a decade, but whenever there's like a, you know, a bit of a sharp aspect, a sharp conversation between two planets, we bring it up. If that fantasy is kind of limiting you or choking you to the point where you feel like an absolute failure at all times, then the advice would be at this new moon to give yourself an effing break. That maybe a little bit of nice advice for you is that you're not alone in that idea. Again, depending on how old you are, it might not even be something that you're considering at the moment, or you might be from the younger generations that are rapidly not considering that as an option because evolution. It's really lovely to think about the generations that are coming up. You know, the younger generations perhaps won't be as laboured or burdened with the pressure of this card. I love to think about that with a sense of hope. And sometimes I really find it quite flabbergasting that I myself sometimes feel this card as a stone around my neck. I'm queer identifying. I, skipped town, skipped home as soon as I could. I devoted my life to, the queer expression. It's funny though when you sort of look around and you think, well, we're still looking for love, aren't we? Looking for love and acceptance. We're looking for something like this that will keep us around, that will keep us protected and safe and welcome. I think the welcome's the biggest word for this. And yeah, as you get older, you sort of realize some of the hooks that are still stuck in your mouth, your little Pisces fishy mouth, from the past brainwashing of the 2.5 kids and the mortgage and the working hard, own property ownership. This is very particular to the country that I stand on, and it might not be resonating for you if you're not living in a culture that is so highly, the emphasis is on financial growth and legacy, to the sense of my kids are going to have a better life than I did. I'm going to prove that to them by expanding my finances setting down my experience of life and working until I collapse. I don't have the answers for there's another way, because sometimes I feel scared by that too. I come from a different kind of background, so I don't have that sort of tradition of we're going to create a better life for, well, I do emotionally with my mum. Sorry, this is not about me, it's about you, Aquarius. I want you to, at this new moon, chill. And it might be even just a great night if you can remember, or a great afternoon if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me, to, even if it's just meditating for half an hour, to get away from the building pressure of what you're worth, you know, your resources, and try, if you might, to like focus in on your fifth house, your inner child for a second. You know, like let the moon and the sun take their moment in your fifth house. The delusion of this card in your second is still there. And it's okay to, if you feel like you've sort of pissed your life up the wall as well, that's just another thought that's coming to my mind right now. There can be regret at certain stages in life where you're like, well, I was focused on expressing myself a lot, to the point where I didn't really think about my resources because they didn't really, I was cheap to run. You know, I kind of committed to a really low impact lifestyle. But as, you know, things inflate, it's become more difficult for me to maintain that. I'm finding that I have to work twice as hard, or I'm having to go without things that I used to be able to enjoy. Maybe I'm just really tired about trying to cook up something out of nothing. That could be something too, Aquarius. But yeah, the ultimate advice is you don't have to do anything at this one. Yeah, think about, you don't have to do anything, but maybe take a moment to meditate with the moon, which you won't see. It's black night at a new moon. But even take that as like a blanket. Maybe like I've got a beautiful woolen blanket that I sleep under, especially in the winter, and it's really heavy. And I just feel really secure when I'm under that blanket. So maybe slip under a blankie. Well, that's your reading for this one, Aquarius. If you're still here with me, throw me the drama masks in the comments. You don't have to write me anything if you don't want to, but just that would be really helpful. The snakes last time around really helped, so thank you for that. If you can find the drama masks, I don't know. I should have checked my phone before I suggested that. Put just a little emoji would be lovely. Your choice. A banana, you know. A hamburger, I don't care. You can throw some tip money in the jar at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby. I can read your birth chart or your tarot at umaruby.com, and I'll be with you in 2 weeks for the full moon in Capricorn. So until then, Aquarius, you take it easy, relax, and I'll speak to you soon. You're doing fine. You're exactly where you need to be right now in your progress. The trick is to give yourself a cuddle when things get a bit tough. It's advice from me. It's probably advice I can take too. Big love. Bye. Hello, Gemini rising. Welcome to your horoscope for the new moon in Gemini, happening on Sunday the 18th of June at 2:39 p.m. if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me. So this one's for you, Gemini. This is your first house, your house of the self, the soul, the essence. And it's going to be a beautiful night for you to take a little moment to yourself and to really have a little think about where you wish to expand upon next. What direction are you going to go? Did you want to grow out this way or this way or both? But rather than, I guess, everyone else, it's more to do with you and yourself alone. There's a bit of a push and a pull between two signs this time around, Gemini. So we're going to think about you. We're also going to think about Pisces as well. Two mutable signs. One's mutable air, one's mutable water. Both impressionable, both elastic, both able to give way to the next season, to the next round. There's something really conversational about both of these signs and really at home in company. I really like that about Pisces and about Gemini both. They both really thrive on some sense of group, some sense of belonging, and both are really good also at disappearing if that isn't present, if that isn't available to them, or if what they've got to work with is not jiving. But for a for a Gemini rising, Pisces rules the 10th house, which is your career, your most public self. So the reason that I want to bring up Pisces in this reading is because there's two squares happening. There's 2 points of bones of contention happening right now. The moon's at 26 degrees of Gemini, so it's a new moon, a freshness for Gemini, just as we're about to leave the season too. So everything that you kind of think about or dream about at this moon can be sort of taken with you into the next frontier. So we're going to be entering Cancer season. So hopefully there'll be some results and some wishes granted for you over the next 6 months. But back to Pisces. So there's 2 planets in Pisces at present. There's Saturn at 7 degrees and Neptune at 27 degrees. So Neptune's been in Pisces since like 2011 was the first pass. And from 2012, I think it was February 2012, Neptune has been lingering in Pisces, swimming around, bringing some magic to the space, bringing some kind of facade, maybe, some make-believe. So all of this stuff is really great. And we really kind of need that to hang on to, a bit of hope and a bit of possibility in times such as these, Gemini. The difficulty with Neptune is that sometimes it can have us feel a bit deluded. It can have us feel a bit like we're kidding ourselves, or that we are just making shit up. And that can be kind of painful when your base note, your base sort of point of inspiration is coming from somewhere really hopeful and coming from somewhere that wishes to bring folks back to maybe a bit of childlike wonder or a bit of simplicity. I've been really indulging myself in a bit of make-believe over the past few years. I've been really indulging myself in a bit of fantasy, a bit of hopeful possibility. I think it kind of feels like that's really necessary at the moment. And so at this new moon, though, there is, when we think of squares, okay, so 90 degrees apart, that's this moon and that's Neptune. So there is almost like a deluge of influence coming from this hypnotic kind of trippy planet. So have you been having conversations with yourself, which is very Gemini of you, about deluding yourself in terms of your public face, in terms of your career? Have you been maybe a little bit critical over the last month or so when the sun's been in Gemini, highlighting a whole bunch of things to do with your first house, your sense of self? Has there been kind of like a push and a pull, that duality that sometimes we can get? That nasty sister can really say stuck in your ear sometimes. I say that because I sometimes feel a real duality. And when with similar circumstances, if it comes to, lack of money or a sense of security, a sense of safety sometimes too, the darker side of my Gemini persona can be really cruel and can say terrible, terrible things to me, of which I would never say to anyone else. And so I've been maybe working with a bit of this push and pull between sort of staying true to the fantasy of things, staying true to the magic of our existence and what I believe in and what I'm working on and what I'm spending all of my time involved in, and that kind of hypercritical voice that kind of rears up. And I'm noticing definitely around Gemini season, my moon's in Gemini, and so you can see there's a lot of my shadow gets highlighted at this time of the year. It's also the beginning of winter too, or we're sort of giving way to the seasons changing. That's why Gemini is a mutable sign, because it sort of lets go of the last season into the next. So if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, it might be a different experience for you. Down in the South, there is definitely a want to retreat and to huddle and to get warm and quiet. And in that solitude, for me anyway, that's when that nasty effing twin sister of mine starts to yabber in my ear. So I want to look at the tarot because there's two cards that are kind of speaking to me right now, looking at all of this. So the sun and the moon are in the final decan of Gemini. Remember, there's 3 decans in each sign, and there's a tarot card for each of them. The final decan of Gemini is the 10 of Swords, and that's a severe ending. That's a full stop, period, no more. When we think about swords, Gemini, we think about thoughts, right? That's an air sign thing to do. Gemini is mutable air. Gemini is impressionable, rolling, talkative communication in the mind. And in some way, looking at this tarot and looking at this configuration and maybe wanting or willing a bit more magic, a bit more fantasy for this moon, we have the 10 of Cups at the final decan of Pisces, so the 3rd decan of Pisces. There's a rainbow, there's a culmination of emotional lessons, there's a great feeling of success with this card. But remember, I always say when you look at this one, it's kind of like, and then what? Like, do the credits roll? Is this it? Happily ever after, forevermore? That's bullshit. We know that. We know that that doesn't happen in this life. And we know that this is what we've got to work with. This cyclical sort of nature of time. Things come up, things go away. I think I kind of like to really remind myself of that, particularly maybe around Gemini season, because there is that resurgence perhaps of hypercriticism or laying out all of the successes and losses in life and thinking to oneself, okay, well, I'm at this point in my development. When is it going to get easier? At this time, am I always going to have this battle with this negativity? Some of us do. Some of us do have a dance to dance with that dark sister in this life. What we are working on is making it easier each time, kind of checking in, dropping into the symptomatic occurrences, if that makes any sense, the symptoms that show up as a precursor to perhaps the sort of the darker recesses. In my experience, I get really agitated and angry and effed off first. I get really annoyed with myself, with everything, the way that my hair's looking, with the, with the alarm clock, with, There's an irritability that shows up. And then that's a sign that things are going to get a little darker, because I get angry at myself for being irritated. And then that's when one monkey bar is missed. Try and catch the next one, try and catch the next one. And it can get pretty miserable. But the strategies that we develop and work on, that's how we sort of move forward. That's how we keep things going. It's okay to find yourself somewhere that you recognize and that you'd much rather not be. It's okay to find the same bog, being stuck in the same mud again, sort of trying to turn the wheels, trying to get it over the line, trying to move. We can get really frustrated with ourselves, and we can sort of say, that lesson was learned. Why do you come back here? It's a good question. It's a good question to ask yourself. What has brought us here again? What's been happening in the outside world or in my day-to-day life that's triggered this criticism or triggered this frustration or this worry or this pessimism? And how am I going to take this moment in the bog? How am I going to sit with this? How am I going to work through it? And if it's different from the last time, that's beautiful. That's development. That's something to be proud of. That's something to relax about too. The other thing that's going on too, so I said that there was a bit of a push and a pull, a bit of duality with this moon. There's definitely this sort of magical delusion of Neptune happening in Pisces, and that's affecting this new moon. So it might even be a good thing to kind of just kind of go with it. Like, you don't have to be sort of hyper activated at this new moon. You might just kind of tune into the subliminal messaging of Neptune. The other configuration, the other square, as a matter of fact, is between Saturn at 7 degrees and Mercury at 11 degrees. So they would have just left exactitude at this new moon, that sort of 7 degrees square. But Mercury is your guiding light. If you're a Gemini rising, you often look to Mercury for clues as to where we can focus our attention on, and who's being helpful and who's not being helpful. Mercury in Gemini is incredibly useful because that sort of bridge of the messenger bridge, the bridge that sort of attaches us to receive the downloads from somewhere else, is really put to great use in Gemini because of the chatty Cathy nature of your sign. In a square with Saturn, who is much more invested in harder lessons and critique and a critical eye, different to Neptune. Neptune's taken a trip, and Saturn is there tapping their feet, checking their watch, waiting for Neptune to come down again. So these two energies in Pisces, in your 10th house, your career, your public self, your legacy, what you really want to leave behind. And this conflict between your first house of the self and that 10th house of legacy. It might be the simplest message for you, Gemini, might just to simply be to receive the fantasy. I probably wouldn't suggest to kind of stub it out. Magical thinking is such a savior at times like this. Maybe after you've developed the list of those possibilities, those different directions or those signs, after that, then maybe Saturn is there in your 10th as well, saying, okay, well, what's doable? Gemini? Is this actually tenable? Can we work with this? Or is that going to have you start at the very beginning again, which will only frustrate you? If starting at the very beginning again doesn't frustrate you, if that's a fresh new page that needs to be turned, then Gemini, go with it. Lean into Neptune. Lean into the whirlwind of stardust. But if you're going to sort of scrape something into the bin because it hasn't taken yet, maybe have a listen to Saturn. Have a listen to the one that knows about time and what it takes, and also what discipline it takes to continue on. That's your reading for this one, Gemini. Yeah, I think I'm taking it slow. I'm going to keep my ear out for Neptune. But I'm also going to keep my ear out for Saturn too. I think I can almost hear Saturn already, That bitchy twin sister might be Saturn at this time for me. That's why it's sort of so crowded in there at the moment. But I will be speaking to you in 2 weeks for the full moon in Capricorn, which will be a nice one. It will be a stern one, as it always is in Capricorn. If you would like to send me some tip money, you can head to buymeacoffee.com/umaruby and throw some money in the tip jar. I can read your birth chart over at umaruby.com, or I can read your tarot at the same place. And if you're still here with me, maybe send me the drama masks. That might be nice. There's a bit of duality with these readings, I think, Gemini. So you don't have to say anything, but last time, all of those beautiful snakes really helped me out with the visibility of the work. So the masks would be really good. Thanks. Love you. Bye.